On May 28, 1940, in Berlin, Reich Marshal Hermann Göring looked at an intelligence report with clear disdain. The report detailed President Franklin Roosevelt's request to Congress for a massive increase in American aircraft production, aiming to create 50,000 planes each year. Göring scoffed at the idea, saying to his staff, "The Americans must be desperate to think this kind of propaganda will intimidate us. They have no understanding of war production. Let them attempt to repurpose their car factories, and they will discover that making warplanes is much more complex than running assembly lines." What Göring failed to see was that in Detroit, a Danish immigrant named William Knudsen was already proving him wrong. The former president of General Motors was now working for just $1 a year as Roosevelt's production chief. He was leading the most ambitious industrial transformation in history. Within 4 years, American factories would not just meet the seemingly impossible goal of 50,000 aircraft, but they would produce nearly 100,000 planes each year, while also supplying 2 theaters of war across vast oceans. The announcement that triggered German disdain occurred on May 16, 1940, as German tanks advanced through France. During a speech to Congress, Franklin Roosevelt affirmed, "I would like to see this nation prepared to produce at least 50,000 planes annually." The response was one of doubt, even among allies. In 1939, the United States had produced a mere 3,611 military aircraft. The Army Air Corps only had 1,700 combat planes, many of which were outdated. Nevertheless, Roosevelt called for a 14-fold increase in production. William Knudsen emerged as the mastermind behind this ambitious plan. When asked who would make such seemingly impossible production levels achievable, presidential advisor Bernard Baruch replied, "First, Bill Knudsen. Second, Bill Knudsen. Bill Knudsen." Knudsen had left behind a $300,000 salary to serve his adopted country, applying automotive mass production techniques to aircraft manufacturing. The revolution began at once. By December 1941, American factories churned out 2,000 military aircraft each month, a 20-fold increase from just 2 years prior. The Ford Motor Company announced plans for a large bomber plant at Willow Run, Michigan. Boeing expanded its operations in Seattle. Douglas Aircraft hired thousands of new workers. The arsenal of democracy was coming to life, while the Nazi leadership's underestimation of American capabilities stemmed from both racial arrogance and ignorance. General Friedrich von Berthier served as the military attaché in Washington from 1933 to 1941. He provided accurate reports on American industrial mobilization. In December 1940, he sent a cable warning that American war production would reach unimaginable levels. Berlin dismissed his warnings as defeatist exaggeration. During a meeting with Adolf Hitler in February 1939, Berthier tried to discuss American potential. However, Hitler ranted about what he saw as American racial degeneracy. He claimed that Americans were half Judaized and half negrified, believing they could not sustain warfare. This ideological blindness would lead to dire consequences. Prejudice was evident throughout all levels of the German leadership. Luftwaffe intelligence regarded reports of women entering aircraft factories as signs of American desperation. They could not fathom that democratic mobilization could surpass the efficiency of totalitarian command. When news came of factories operating 3 shifts, German analysts assumed it was an exaggeration. The Nazi worldview simply could not comprehend American reality. Ford's Willow Run plant epitomized this ambition. Built on farmland starting April 18, 1941, it became the largest factory in the world under one roof, covering 3.5 million square feet, with an assembly line stretching a mile long. Charles Sorensen, Ford's production chief, promised to build 1 B-24 Liberator bomber every hour when other factories averaged 1 per day. However, the initial results were disastrous. The first bomber, which was completed in September 1942, needed a complete rebuild. Quality control failures reached a staggering 50%. By February 1943, Willow Run managed to produce only 56 bombers monthly, despite promises of hundreds. Critics began to refer to it with skepticism, asking, "Will it run?" Nevertheless, Ford engineers persisted. They transformed the B-24, which originally had 488 parts, into manageable subassemblies. They invented hydraulic riveting tools and prefabricated wiring harnesses, and they implemented moving assembly lines. They adapted to 578 design changes in 1943 while maintaining production. By September 1943, monthly production reached 148 bombers. By December, it increased to 365. A major breakthrough occurred in April 1944, when Willow Run produced 428 B-24s, which meant one every 63 minutes, around the clock. This single factory outproduced the entire German aviation industry. German pilots first recognized the superiority of American production during the Tunisia campaign. Major Johannes Steinhoff, who commanded JG-77, remarked in December 1942 that American pilots were no longer amateurs, most alarming, their numbers keep increasing every single day. This truth spread rapidly through the year 1943. On January 27th, the first American air raid on Germany took place. 64 bombers targeted Wilhelmshaven. By October, during Black Thursday at Schweinfurt, Americans faced the loss of 60 B-17 bombers, but could replace them in 2 weeks. The numbers were undeniable. From February 20th to 25th, 1944, during Big Week, the 8th and 15th Air Forces carried out 3,500 bombing missions against German aircraft production. The Luftwaffe lost between 262 and 355 fighters, but more critically, they lost around 100 irreplaceable veteran pilots. General Adolf Galland reported to Hermann Göring that Germany was losing 1,200 fighters each month while producing only 1,000. In contrast, the United States was producing 2,500 fighters monthly, while losing 400. Major Heinz Baer, one of Germany's leading aces with 220 victories, recounted a mission over Brunswick in January 1944. The bomber formation stretched from one horizon to the other, consisting of at least 700 flying fortresses and liberators. We were only 8 fighters against hundreds. There was no hope. By 1944, the production of American aircraft soared to astonishing levels. That year alone, factories manufactured 96,270 aircraft, including 1,648 four-engine bombers, 35,743 fighters, and 22,591 multi-engine aircraft. The production for just that year surpassed Germany's entire wartime output of approximately 94,677 aircraft. The differences extended beyond the sheer numbers. Each American bomber was equipped with 13.50 caliber machine guns and thousands of rounds of ammunition. German fighters increasingly took off with incomplete ammunition loads. American bombers also included powered turrets, advanced bomb sights, and sophisticated navigation tools, while German fighters often lacked operational radios. By May 1944, Boeing's plant in Seattle was producing 16 B-17 bombers each day. Douglas Aircraft, which employed only 68 people in 1936, expanded to 167,000 workers across 9 facilities. North American Aviation was producing 500 P-51 Mustangs every month. Lockheed managed to create 1 P-38 Lightning every 90 minutes while implementing 2,127 combat-driven modifications. Support industries kept up with this growth. General Motors manufactured 57,658 aircraft engines under license. Packard produced 55,523 Rolls-Royce Merlins. Alcoa increased its aluminum production by 600%. Dow Chemicals raised its magnesium output from 6 million annually to 333 million. The transformation of America's workforce shattered Nazi assumptions. Women made up less than 1% of the workforce. By 1941, aircraft workers in the United States were comprised of 65% women by 1943. Among those in the aircraft industry, there were 310,000 women. At the Douglas plant in Long Beach, 22,380 out of 41,620 employees were female. Rose Will Monroe, known as the original Rosie the Riveter, was able to drive 3,000 rivets in a single shift at Willow Run, achieving an impressive accuracy rate of 99.5%. Women inspectors at Douglas significantly reduced defect rates from 3.2%. Ford's redesign of tools suited for smaller hands inadvertently led to better efficiency. The introduction of lighter pneumatic tools helped lessen fatigue, and improved workstation layouts minimized injuries. German intelligence misread this surge in female employment, viewing it as a sign of desperation. A captured report from the Luftwaffe labeled these workers as temporary and predicted a decline in quality. Contrary to that expectation, the precision of work actually improved. Women excelled in tasks requiring fine detail, such as wiring, instrumentation, and inspection. Their incorporation into the workforce symbolized democratic strength, not a weakness. As production in the United States surged, Germany sunk deeper. In February 1944, Hermann Göring initiated the Jagger program. This sought to disperse production across 729 underground facilities using slave labor. The middle complex employed 60,000 prisoners under horrific conditions, resulting in 20,000 casualties. Notably, these underground factories produced more defective parts than usable aircraft. Slave laborers engaged in sabotage, and the logistics of moving materials between various sites led to further delays. Overall, quality control crumbled, and the entire middle work complex was able to produce fewer engines each month than Ford's single plant in Chicago. Meanwhile, American innovation thrived. Boeing introduced modular construction for the B-29, utilizing 4 facilities with completely interchangeable parts. The pressurized B-29, costing $65,000 each, featured technologies that Germany could not replicate in its prototypes. By early 1945, the United States was producing 100 B-29 aircraft every month. The events of June 6, 1944, showcased the peak of American production. The invasion saw 11,519 Allied aircraft deployed against just 319 German sorties, demonstrating a staggering superiority of 36-1. This wasn't merely a tactical advantage, it was industrial annihilation. Between January and May 1944, preparatory bombing missions dropped 145,000 tons of explosives on German targets, surpassing the total amount of bombs Germany had ever dropped on Britain throughout the war. Transport aircraft successfully delivered 3 airborne divisions in just one day, utilizing more planes than the entirety of Germany's transport fleet ever possessed. By December 1944, single raids had involved 1,1200 bombers, supported by 900 fighters. The P-51 Mustangs had the range to reach as far as Poland, the performance to hold their own against any adversary, and were available in such numbers that losses became increasingly irrelevant. German pilots referred to them as Indians, swarming all around at once. As defeat loomed, even the Nazi leadership recognized the disaster in production. In December 1944, Joseph Goebbels recorded in his diary, Hermann Göring's promises about Luftwaffe superiority now seem like criminal delusions. We are fighting the world's greatest industrial power with mere words. Before D-Day, a military leader warned his staff, "The Americans can lose 10 tanks for each one we destroy and still overwhelm us. When they land, they will bring such material superior that no position will hold." Even Adolf Hitler conceded to his associates in January 1945 that they should have heeded Bertika's reports. Their industrial potential was decisive. While we constructed hundreds, they built tens of thousands. Albert Speer later testified that American bombing reduced German production by 35% for tanks, 31% for aircraft, and 42% for trucks. He stated clearly that the American attacks, which followed a systematic approach to targeting industrial sites, led to the breakdown of German armament production. Germany's Messerschmitt Me 262 jet fighter, operational by mid-1944, represented a true innovation. Flying 100 miles per hour faster than any Allied fighter, Hitler and Göring believed this wonder weapon could restore air superiority, despite being outnumbered. However, Germany only produced 1430 Me 262s in total, with no more than 200 operational at the same time. The engines required maintenance every 10 hours. Essential materials were unavailable, leading to inferior replacements. Meanwhile, America had begun jet development in 1942. The Bell P-59 was inferior to German jets, but Lockheed's P-80 Shooting Star, which surpassed any German jet, went into production before the war's end. America's industrial strength allowed for the simultaneous pursuit of multiple technologies, a luxury that Germany could not afford. This contrast highlighted the outcome of the production war. Germany's technological superiority in jets was insignificant against America's capacity to produce thousands of conventional fighters while also developing next-generation aircraft. In total war, quality without quantity proved to be worthless. Hermann Göring's arrest on May 8, 1945, by elements of the United States 36th Infantry Division marked the start of his confrontation with reality. Initially defiant at the interrogation facility in Augsburg, he insisted that German technology had been superior, overcome only by the numbers. His later transfer to Camp Ashken in Luxembourg furthered his reckoning. The specialized facility for high-ranking Nazi prisoners focused intensely on interrogation. In July 1945, Major Kenneth Heckler carried out detailed interviews that captured Hermann Göring's growing acknowledgement of American industrial power. "I recognized American industrial potential was significant," Göring confessed to Heckler. "But the execution surpassed my worst fears. That single factory at Willow Run produced more aircraft than our entire bomber force at its peak. It was unfathomable." He expressed particular amazement at American logistics. "Your capacity to supply forces across two oceans while maintaining domestic production was beyond our understanding. We couldn't adequately support forces 500 miles from Germany. You managed to supply armies 5,000 miles from America." During his trial in Nuremberg, prosecutors confronted Göring with extensive proof of American production superiority. Charts illustrated that by 1944, America was producing more aircraft monthly than Germany could manage in an entire year. Films showcasing the assembly lines at Willow Run, played as prosecutors, listed German cities devastated by bombers from that one factory. Göring's testimony on March 14, 1946, revealed his difficulty in grasping the magnitude. "I believed the economic and technical potential of the United States was exceptionally high, especially for the Air Force. However, I never envisioned they could increase aircraft production 100-fold in 4 years. Such growth appeared physically impossible." Psychologist G.M. Gilbert noted Göring's obsession with production statistics. He frequently calculated ratios, comparing individual American factories to entire German production. He was especially fixated on Willow Run, labeling it "that damned factory that broke our backs." When presented with the fact that America had produced 812,615 aircraft engines, compared to Germany's 241,675, Göring could only gaze at the numbers in silence. The mathematical truth of defeat was undeniable. The scale of this transformation is staggering even today. From just 3,080 military aircraft in 1940, America produced 295,959 by the war's end, including 97,810 bombers, 99,465 fighters, and 98,684 other types. This achievement was not only about quantity, but also reflected systemic superiority in every production aspect. At its peak, 2 million Americans worked in aircraft production, showcasing an unprecedented diversity. Women, African Americans, Mexican Americans, Native Americans, disabled workers, teenagers, and elderly citizens all played vital roles in this democratic mobilization. Totalitarian command failed where voluntary cooperation thrived. The output of voluntary workers surpassed forced labor metrics. The workforce that entered factories in 1941, lacking experience in aviation, transformed by 1945 into the world's most skilled aviation workers. They did not merely construct planes, they also revolutionized manufacturing as a whole. The principles of statistical quality control, developed during bomber production, became a global industrial standard. Automation techniques introduced at Willow Run reshaped worldwide manufacturing. The engineers who designed bomber assembly lines went on to create the Saturn V rocket. The women who riveted B-24 bombers would eventually raise children who walked on the moon. The remarkable production achievements did not stop with the end of the war. They set the stage for the American century. The financial implications challenged conventional economic theory. Aircraft production consumed $45 billion in 1940s currency, equivalent to $800 billion today. The B-29 program alone cost more than the Manhattan Project. Yet instead of leading to bankruptcy, war production fostered extraordinary prosperity. Unemployment, which had plagued the decade of the Great Depression, disappeared entirely. Personal income doubled from 1940 to 1945. Workers financed much of the expansion through war bond sales. Workers at Willow Run alone bought $45 million in bonds to support their own factories' operations. In contrast, Germany utilized 40% of its entire industrial capacity for aircraft production by 1944, but produced less than half of what America did. Reliance on slave labor proved to be catastrophically counterproductive. Sabotage was widespread, and quality suffered. Productivity per German worker actually fell after 1943, while American productivity soared by 300%. The production infrastructure established for wartime efforts laid the groundwork for post-war prosperity. Aluminum smelters built for bomber construction provided materials for suburban housing. Chemical plants that once produced aviation fuel pivoted to create plastics for consumer goods. Machine tool factories that supplied aircraft manufacturing stepped up to prepare American industry for global leadership. Beyond raw production, organizational excellence played a vital role. The War Production Board effectively coordinated 184,000 companies. IBM punch card machines managed millions of components from thousands of suppliers. MIT's Radiation Laboratory, employing 4,000 scientists, developed navigation systems that enabled American bombers to operate in any weather. To enhance frontal assaults, Boeing installed chin turrets within 60 days. When operations in the Pacific required longer ranges, modifications to B-24s were carried out without halting production. In contrast, modifications in Germany could take months or even years. The American ability to adapt quickly was just as crucial as their production numbers. American aircraft continuously evolved based on experiences from global combat. Information from battles in the Pacific reached production lines in the Atlantic in just a matter of days. Meanwhile, German aircraft, produced in isolated underground facilities using slave labor, remained unchanged even as American designs improved every week. The efficient feedback loop between combat and production was unprecedented. Pilots communicated their observations directly to engineers, who then provided solutions that made their way to assembly lines in mere days. Suggestions from assembly line workers reached the designers without delay. This open exchange of information proved far more effective than the German hierarchical command structure. On October 15, 1946, just hours before his execution, Hermann Göring wrote his final letter. In it, he acknowledged the significance of the production war in full. The Americans triumphed not because of superior military strategy, but due to their industrial might. They were not defeated by better's half, soldiers, but by better factories. The nation that many regarded solely as a producer of consumer goods ultimately overwhelmed the German war machine with aluminum and steel. In his last statement to Gilbert, Göring made further admissions. He remarked that they had declared war on an industrial powerhouse while it was at rest. Once it awoke, their fate was sealed. The Americans didn't just outproduce the Germans. They revolutionized the very concept of production. Every element of their system outperformed that of the Germans. That night, Göring took his own life, but his final remarks remain a testament to history's assessment of the production war. The Reichsmarshal, who once underestimated American capacity, died aware that a single American factory surpassed the entire lifetime production of his Air Force. Military historians regard the American production feat as the key to Allied victory. Without the overwhelming material advantage it offered, D-Day would not have been achievable. The bombing campaign would have been unsustainable, and victory in the Pacific would have been impossible. Richard Overy, a prominent historian of the air war, pointed out that the outcome was dictated not by courage or strategy, but by sheer material strength. The Allies succeeded because they overwhelmed their enemies with an immense production capacity. The facts clearly back this claim. By 1944, the United States was producing more military aircraft than the entire world combined, including both Axis and Allied powers. This was not just a slight advantage, it was a significant and overwhelming dominance. Germany was not just facing defeat, it was facing total destruction. However, the importance of this production miracle went beyond just military victory. It showcased the superiority of democracy over dictatorship. It highlighted the benefits of freedom over oppression and the strength of voluntary cooperation compared to forced obedience. The workers who made this incredible transformation possible were not slaves or conscripts. They were free citizens working together toward a shared goal. Hermann Göring's underestimation of American production capacity stands out as one of the most disastrous errors in history. His disdain for democratic industrial power ultimately cost Germany the war and billions of lives. His failure to acknowledge American capabilities sealed the fate of the Third Reich well before the first bomber reached German airspace. The leap from producing 3,000 aircraft to 100,000 each year proved that free societies can achieve the extraordinary when faced with great threats. American workers not only accomplished President Franklin D. Roosevelt's challenging goal, they exceeded it by doubling their output. They surpassed German production by 5 times while also fighting in the Pacific Theater. Current leaders should take heed of Göring's mistake. Underestimating democratic nations as weak due to their peaceful nature or misjudging the productivity of free people who favor prosperity over conquest can lead to severe miscalculations. In 1940, America seemed ill-prepared for war. By 1944, it had transformed into an unstoppable industrial giant. The arsenal of democracy demonstrated that production lines could be as critical as battlefronts. It showed that assembly workers could be just as vital as soldiers, and that industrial mobilization could dictate victory as much as military strategy. Göring learned this lesson far too late, resulting in the destruction of his nation. From his dismissive response to Roosevelt's announcement in May 1940 to his execution at Nuremberg in October 1946, Göring's journey mirrored the decline of Nazi Germany. His contempt for American industrial strength became emblematic of the Third Reich, a regime that confused ideology with practical capability, mistook tyranny for real strength, and believed that racial myths could overcome the realities of industrial production. American aircraft production surpassed all expectations. The factories of the United States produced more planes in 1944 than Germany did throughout the entire war. Hermann Göring's mockery of democratic industrial might became a costly joke, paid for with total defeat. The United States made 295,959 military aircraft. Germany managed to produce 94,677. However, the true victory was not just in numbers, it was in the method. It showed that free workers could outproduce slaves. It proved that democratic cooperation could surpass dictatorial command. A nation of immigrants and diverse citizens united to achieve the seemingly impossible. The B-24 bombers rolling off the Willow Run assembly line every 63 minutes were not merely aircraft. They were democracy's response to tyranny. Each rivet was driven by a woman who had been a housewife just months before. Each engine was built by a teenager who left high school to serve. Each wing was assembled by workers who fled from poverty and discrimination. All of this demonstrated that free peoples, united in a righteous cause, could bury tyranny beneath a mountain of production. Hermann Göring laughed at the prospect of America producing 50,000 planes annually. In response, America produced twice that number, fundamentally changing global history. His laughter echoed through time as the sound of critical miscalculation. He misjudged both the strength of democracy and the scale of production. Ultimately, both buried him and everything he stood for under 300,000 aircraft, transforming his contempt into history's most complete defeat.